Welcome to our webinar from Open to Export on food and drink exporting. My name is Was Rahman. I work with UK Trade and Investment, and I'm part of the team that is bringing you Open to Export, the service that UKTI and Typhoo have been developing to help primarily SMEs that are looking to export or get better at exporting. As you probably all know that are on this webinar, it's a free-to-use service, and we are in the middle of doing a food and drink feature. I think a lot of you have come to this webinar having seen the banners talking about it on the page that's on your screens now. It's something where we've been focusing on all of the questions that our export SMEs have been asking us about how to get their businesses more successful overseas. And on that particular feature, when you go to the site, you'll see things like some new reports from the various federations and trade associations and government departments helping us. But I think what you'll also hopefully have seen is that there's an awful lot of private sector support. And with that in mind, I think we'll start talking about what we're going to do today. We've got about an hour of your time. We expect to get you away promptly at 4 o'clock. And during the next hour, we're going to concentrate on a couple of case studies. This is a little different to how we've done some of our previous webinars. A lot of those have been people that are in the business of giving advice, talking about specific topics and going into some very specific questions and queries for the audience. Today what we've done is brought two very successful businesses that have got a very different perspective on how to use exports to improve their businesses in the food and drink sector. While they're talking, I think you'll have a lot of very interesting material that you'll be listening and seeing on screen, but you will be able to ask questions which I'll then see, and I'll be able to ask them on your behalf, either while they're speaking at the end of their session, or we're hoping to spend 10 or 15 minutes at the very end to run through the questions. But what I'm going to do before we start that is just give everyone a sense of where the audience is in terms of exports, because depending on whether you're just starting or whether you're experienced, there'll probably be different things that you need to know. So if you could take a look at the screen in front of you, everyone, there'll be 3 questions coming up that asks you to tell us whereabouts in the export journey you are. If you could all take a moment to click, we'll get a sense of the profile of the audience, and that'll help the panelists with their discussion. It'll also help me understand what kind of questions we're best off asking. Now, so far I've got most of you answering. While you're finishing that, we're going to hand over in a moment to Terry Jones. Terry is the Director of Communications at the Food and Drink Federation. I'm sure most of you know that the Food and Drink Federation is the voice of the UK food and drink industry. They represent manufacturers of all sizes as well as trade associations. And Terry has an awful lot of experience, not just with the Food and Drink Federation, but prior with people like the NFU and others. Terry's going to spend a few moments talking to you about this subject more generally, but before we get into Terry, let me close this poll and show you the answers, which show that it's pretty even split, but there's about half of the folks are considering exporting. Okay, I'm now going to ask my colleague to switch the slides back over to Terry's slide, and as soon as that happens, which should happen any moment soon, we get back to Terry. Terry, are you there and ready to give us a few minutes on the benefits of exporting?
I am, Was, and thank you very much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. As Was has said, FDF's a trade association. We represent large and small businesses, and we're 100 years old this year. We're celebrating our centenary, and our members have got a long and proud heritage of exporting, and we've been able to look back on that this year. I should just explain though why that's so important. As part of our sort of key objectives, one of those is to deliver increased rates of sustainable growth for the sector, and we've got a vision shared with government to deliver 20% growth by 2020, and our research with companies was clear that government and industry needed to work collaboratively on 3 main areas: on skills, on innovation, and on exports. And our work on exports focuses on promoting its benefits, making it easier for businesses to export, and reducing the barriers that companies 9 years, and all food and drink exports would have continued to grow strongly if it hadn't have been for last year's poor weather and harvest of last year. So let's look at the numbers. Well, we are the largest manufacturing sector in the UK, and we should celebrate that, and a lot of our important stakeholders know that. And we turn over £90 billion, 75% of all our food and drink exports are to the EU, but non-EU markets continue to grab this share with our close neighbours, but also the US, and those really are our biggest customers. But despite the success of companies such as the two upcoming speakers, we know that only around 10% of food and drink businesses export. And that means that the UK is losing out as our competitors in the EU are, we know, proactively seeking new opportunities in those quickly growing emerging markets. So I guess the question is, what's in it for you? Well, we know that exports grew 5 times quicker than domestic sales in the last 2 years, and many of you will know how tough the domestic market is. Proactive exporters see 20% of their sales share come from exports, compared to only 5% who wait for the inquiries to come their way. And we also know that almost 2/3 of businesses in a recent survey indicated that exports lead to new product development and greater levels of investment activity. So, how do you take advantage of trading overseas, and who's there to help? So, just a couple of points to make here. Our new 10 Steps to Export Success Guide, which was developed jointly by FDF and the Food and Drink Exporters Association, signposts you directly to websites and information that can help you along the way. And there's some really great content in there. We also launch export performance figures every 6 months, which provide an in-depth look at export growth in most of the food and drink product categories, and those give you some really useful trends. But I guess your first port of call should always be UKTI. They can assess what actions you need to take to get on that proactive export journey, and they've got a real raft of services. The excellent Food and Drink Exporters Association offer the opportunity to join many international trade fairs that they organise, and they're a great opportunity to promote your products and expertise. And then lastly, and I guess the reason that we've all been brought together today, Open to Export is a fantastic facility that enables you to tap into a raft of information and access experts free of charge. Now, I know if you want to know more about particularly Open to Export and UKTI, then I think there's a second webinar on Thursday afternoon of this week, given that it's Food and Drink Focus Week on the site. So it only really remains for me to wish you well on your export journey. As a trade association, we want to deliver sustainable growth, and exports are clearly going to be key to our continued success. So all the best on that export journey. I'm always on the end of an email or a phone, and I'm fortunate as well that we've got an export lead at FDF, James Marquette, and his contact details are on the screen for you there as well. So thank you very much.
Terry, that was great. I've got a couple of questions that, as a few people have heard, if you've got any questions for any of the speakers, typing them in as you go. There was the panel that I highlighted, and then I can ask. There's one or two things that are coming through that, if I could take your time. I think quite a few people, especially when you saw the poll, are either considering exporting or just getting started. In other words, their experience has only been doing stuff in the UK, doing it as well as they can. And the sense I get, and what's behind the question, is people feel like they're probably going to ask you stupid questions that they shouldn't be asking because there are probably other people that are going to do a lot better. Is there any such thing as a stupid question? What are the kinds of things that people really come to you with, the very basics, that you think are useful? Is that something you could talk to for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't. I mean, such is the camaraderie, if you like, in the industry, and certainly that's how we operate at FDF. I don't think there is any such thing as a stupid question, because people recognise that they're on different steps on the export journey. I think probably the best place to start, though, would be the recently published 10 Steps to Export Success, because if you are worried, if you are concerned that you're going to ask something that may on the face of it seem quite basic, then you're almost certainly going to find the answers in that guide. But I would say as well, this, we know from the work that we've done on the Export Action Plan that we've got some, and you'll hear from two of them today, there are any number of people that have been on this journey for a long time, and they have an awful lot of experience and guidance that they can share. But I mean, I think there's no end of help out there, and people shouldn't be concerned. And indeed, it's important to ask the really big questions, because you may discover after your initial trawl that actually export isn't for you. But unless we really drill into this and ask those questions, I think it's impossible to tell.
Okay, so I want to use another sort of half minute or minute of your time, because we'll see two examples of, as you say, people that have learned to do this well coming on next. But someone's asking if you can tell us the kinds of companies that are doing this well. And it doesn't necessarily mean their sector or their background, but is there anything that stands out when you've seen companies that have exported well and ones that haven't? Are there any characteristics that people can look at and say, this is what I need to make sure I'm emulating before I get into this?
And this is a personally held view, rather than anything that that we've got written down as a position. I'll kick off with that first. What I have tended to see when we've been doing the PR side of exports, every 6 months we put out the numbers and we get a lot of press interest. But what we find always is that in every company there seems to be an export enthusiast. But to characterise those individuals and others that I've seen make a success, I think it's about ambition, I think it's about hard work, I think it's about proactiveness and the willingness to approach people and markets. And if I've seen anything of food and drink manufacturing throughout my time in FDF, member companies and non-member companies embody all of those characteristics in spades.
Okay, that's really useful. I think it was Olivia that asked the question. Olivia, you're going to find out from a couple of the speakers what two examples sound like and feel like, and I think it might be an interesting discussion to follow up on Open to Export by asking the question more generally and seeing what other people think. We've got a question from someone asking if there's going to be a copy of the slides, just so everyone knows. Once we're done with this, we're recording it live. We'll be consolidating it and putting it up onto the YouTube channel. And so if you go back to Open to Exports, then you'll find the recording there. If I start this poll now, it talks about the biggest barrier to exporting your products. If you're able to answer that, it goes towards answering one of the questions that someone's asked about what are the main difficulties people have faced. Let's start with what the people on the webinar feel the most difficult barriers are, and that's a good starting point. And then we're going to get on to the next two speakers, and they'll tell you what the barriers were they faced and how they dealt with them. While you're just finishing that, just to remind you, this webinar and Open to Export in general, it's supported by UKTI, the government department that helps businesses export. That's certainly what we do in our part of the organisation. And Open to Export is a very important part of how we deliver all of our services. But it is an online service that's delivered with private sector. So by asking your questions online, what you'll find is the best of the government and private sector support and peers, other people that are in the businesses that you're in, that'll answer the same questions. Okay, I think it's probably time to close this poll and see what the answers are. Okay, so what we're finding is that lack of expertise, unsurprisingly, is what a lot of people are saying is an issue. But the other thing that's coming out is the regulations in international markets, and that very much chimes with what we're hearing from people that we speak to. I think one of the things we're doing, not just with today, but on Thursday's webinar, is getting some experts that can help understand the regulatory environment and how you get yourself around these regulations without massive overhead. But what I'm going to do now is move us on. If we can get the next slide up, we're going to be hearing from Maria Whitehead. Maria is a director of a company called the Hawkshead Relish Company, and I'm sure a lot of you, if you've not heard of the company, probably tasted their products. Maria actually co-founded the organization, and what we're going to start with is a few minutes from Maria as an example of someone who's taken a successful small business pretty much from scratch, got to a stage where it's doing really well, and then said, how do I use exports to make things even better? So it's very much taking the opportunity, making it positive, and going better. And we'll talk later about how he contrasts with other times when people might use exporting. Maria, are you on the line, able to take us through the slides?
I am, yes. Hello, good afternoon. Well, welcome to the Hawkshead Relish Company. For the benefit of anybody who doesn't know who we are, we're a small business based in the Lake District. We make a range of about 130 different relishes, pickles and preserves. Our market is very much to high-end independent shops and stores. We have 300 stockists in the UK, and we export to over 30 countries across the globe. I'm hoping today I'll show you a little bit of how we've managed to do that and how we can bring some of our knowledge into your business to help you. So I am Maria Whitehead, and together with Mark, my husband, we started the business some 14 years ago. Mark has a catering background, and he looks after all of the production, logistics, the new product development, whilst I oversee the office, the sales and the financial side of the business. We began by running a small cafe and restaurant in Hawkshead, which is a popular tourist destination in the Lake District. Mark likes to research the history and provenance of food, and so he made a few relishes and preserves using local ingredients and spices, which are traditional to the area, and we serve those with our locally sourced menu. Then the Hawkshead Relish was then born. But in 2001, it came to a grinding halt when, in February of that year, foot and mouth was discovered and the countryside was effectively off limits. After a few days without any customers, it was clear that we were in trouble and in a quite precarious financial position. Seeing the empty kitchen was a catalyst that propelled us to do something and not just wait for fate to come knocking at our door. So Mark increased the range in begged and borrowed jars and got cooking. He took them out to shops and delicatessens locally and then further afield as we grew. Although the Hawkshead Relish Company was only a sideline at that time to the cafe, it soon became a major revenue stream and clearly had growth potential. And by 2005, we had won several awards, including the Great Taste Producer of the Year award, which propelled the business into a national arena. At that point, we had to close the cafe to make more space for production, and the cafe became our shop as we looked for suitable alternative production site. We found this 16th century barn on the edge of Esthwaite, close to Hawkshead, which was a redundant farm building. DEFRA helped to fund the cost of restoring the roof, but it was still sat empty and looking forlorn in the landscape. We took it on and added a state-of-the-art production kitchen, warehousing and offices, whilst keeping the building looking the same from the outside. I have to say, it doesn't look as sunny as that here today. The shop in Hawkshead became a vital resource, not only as a retail outlet, but where we can interact with customers daily and take valuable feedback on products. We often test out new flavours in the shop and ask the public for honest comments, which gives us a great evaluation of it before it goes into full production. Being a tourist destination also means we have visitors from abroad and especially from Japan, so we have a great opportunity here to test our products on foreign markets while still being in the UK. Today the range stands at around 130. It fluctuates according to the season when we make some limited edition products such as nettle jelly and wild garlic pickle. And from the days when we made 36 jars at a time, we now make around 3,000 jars a day, all still by hand in traditional open pans, but the pans have got quite a lot bigger these days. We don't use any preservatives, colourings or flavourings, and the fact that the recipes we devise are all about quality ingredients with nothing artificial added. We also pop them into a variety of sizes suitable for the catering industry and giftware. This year we have recently completed a new development with the acquisition of a new warehouse where we store all the finished wrapped stock for dispatch. This has enabled us to build a new office suite in the barn and create meeting areas and, most importantly, a development kitchen where Mark can work up new ideas and prepare them for production. We have won 50 Great Taste Awards to date, along with a host of other awards, including the Northwest UKTI Export Award, various retail and business awards, and in 2011 we both received MBEs from Her Majesty the Queen in recognition of our services to the food industry here in Cumbria. Winning the Export Award was particularly valuable as that led to a higher profile within UKTI and acknowledgement within the worldwide offices. The Relish Road to Export, for us, was perhaps a little unconventional. Initially, we were approached by a company from the US at a time when exporting wasn't really on our agenda, purely because we were still building up our UK brand, and quite honestly, it hadn't occurred to us that a small business like ours could export. Luckily for us, the buyer helped us to get the documentation, labelling and listings we needed in order to fulfil his order. And once we'd done that and found it not to be as complicated as we thought, we contacted the local UKTI and they sent an international trade advisor to help us understand all the requirements and sign us up for the Passport to Export programme. At first it does feel very confusing with a huge amount of information, but taking the process slowly, it's easy to achieve and you build up your knowledge as you go. We're still learning new things now. Each and every country has its own set of rules and regulations, customs and quirks. The easiest route has to be within the EC, with documentation fairly minimal. There are certain labelling requirements, but usually the buyer will know what they need, and the Open to Export website is a valuable resource where you can post a question and fairly quickly somebody will respond. Networking in this environment is very useful. Many experiences are the same, even when not in a directly competitive area, so the logistics for us exporting food and drink might not be vastly different to someone exporting something such as a component product, and neither feel threatened as the market is vastly different. So my advice would be to make friends with other similar-sized exporters in your area through a business network such as the FSB and Chamber of Commerce, who work across all business sectors. Distribution for export is many and varied, and we use countless different ways from ex-works, consolidation, shipping, air freight, etc. And every customer requires a different method, so providing you get your costs right, you should be able to manage them easily. Finance can be a tricky area, and again there are different routes to take, and we use different payment methods for practically every customer we have. Some are pro forma, which is obviously the safest option, but your bank will advise you on letters of credit and other options, and all major banks have an international department who specialise, so it's best to speak to them. And whilst I'm talking about finance, it's worth also looking at your insurance. Although every business will vary according to the products you're selling and the markets you're selling to, so you must contact your broker or insurance company, advise them of your export activities and make sure you're adequately covered. Trade missions are organised through the UKTI and have proved to be really useful for us as a way to gain access into a new country. They're usually held, but not always, at the British Embassy in that country. The sector, in our case food and drink, will have a trade advisor who will invite relevant business leaders, buyers and journalists to attend. But one advice I would give is always make sure you do your research before you book your flights. So you'll need to find out about the regulations for that country in relation to the products you're selling. It could be that they're carrying 100% import duty, for example, and immediately price your products out of the market. Use the mission to learn as much as possible, and networking is essential, but enjoy the opportunity to see a new country from a different perspective. It is hard work despite what your friends, colleagues and family may think, but if you try and tag an extra day onto your trip, it's worth seeing these places from the benefit of being a tourist as well as a businesswoman or a businessman. To date, we have about 15% of our turnover coming via exports, but this is very much a growing picture and currently on target to make that 25% this financial year. We have as yet only scratched the surface. We research each country carefully and look at the demographics of population and balance that against our product offer. We avoid countries that we feel will be difficult and work with those that are looking specifically for very high-end and British-made produce. Much is talked in the press of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India and China. And whilst these are real growth sectors, that's across all industry, and it might not be best for you and your business. So knowing these markets and how they relate to your products is vital. Despite our initial doubts and something that Terry mentioned earlier, events such as the Queen's Jubilee and the London 2012 Olympics were a great boost for overseas sales. And the feel-good British campaign of Britain is Great is attracting the media attention and interest across the globe. So now is very much the time to be looking at your export capability. So to sum up, exporting is rewarding and finding the right information has never been easier, but you need to look for the free advice that's on offer from UKTI and the Open to Export website. Join the Food and Drink Federation, the FDF, or the FDEA, Food and Drink Exporters Association. Make contact with your Chamber of Trade and FSB and your local regional food group, all of whom will offer help. The FDF and FDEA hold a plethora of information and will pass on contacts for potential buyers, as will your local UKTI office. Start with Europe and spread your wings wider, and you will find that it is much easier than you may have thought, and there is nothing better than seeing your products on the shelves in another country. Starting to export can take time, and it will cost a lot of expense, so bear that in mind before you start. It can be months or years before your hard work finally comes to pay off, and you will need to allow time not only to learn and attend the courses, but to prepare the documentation, arrange labelling and accommodate for legislation. Despite UKTI offers of funding, in reality, it can take months to come through, so your cash flow needs to be able to cope with that as an ongoing expense. To finish with, I'd like to leave a little thought with you. A few years ago, I was attending an event where I was asked to give my export story. And recently, at another similar event, I met a gentleman who had attended the first one. He told me he is now in his third year of exporting, and thanks to my encouragement, he anticipates sales of over 25 million in exports alone this year. That's a figure I can only dream about. So I hope that I will leave you this webinar today just a bit more encouraged to have a go. And in a few years' time, maybe you'll have a similar smile to his on your face as well. So good luck and thank you.
Maria, thank you very much. That was really not just interesting, but I think pretty inspiring. Particularly for me, the idea of taking what other people would regard as an adversity and turning it into an opportunity. We all read about it, but I think it's just fabulous to see someone that's done this. I think there are a few questions. There's a lot of feedback saying people have really enjoyed what you've been saying. I'm probably going to put most of them off till the end, but there's a couple that I want to bring out now while you've just been speaking. One is I was struck by the fact that you were talking about the premium positioning, the branding of UK as a differentiator, but not just UK generally, but UK as a kind of top-notch. Do you think that's an important part of taking a British brand abroad, or is it enough to be British and go on the whole UK is great kind of thing? What's your sense of the importance of being a premium brand?
For us, it works because that's what we are, so that's what I know. But I do feel that the time is now that all things British have got a really good background behind them, and that the general feel around the world is that Britain stands for quality. And so when you're selling something that is a quality product, it does make it that much easier because your customer is already accepting of that to begin with.
So at the risk of putting words into your mouth, does that mean anyone that's listening to this that is, by definition, a British brand, could they perhaps be taking for granted what other people see as attributes like quality and excellence, and perhaps if they go abroad, they might need to think about changing their positioning and their branding slightly? Is that what we can take from what you said?
Possibly, yes. I mean, you do have to be very careful, and also you've got to look at where the brand is going and the marketplace. So, are you looking at taking a well-known brand and taking it to an expat market, or are you looking for the high-end market of the indigenous people the country that you're looking at and where you position your product.
Okay, that's really quite interesting. What I hope to do is after we've finished with the next speaker, I might come back to that, but let's see how we're doing on time. Before we get to the next speaker, I'm going to put up another poll where we're asking about the export support that people have already accessed. I think one of the messages coming through is think about export, there are opportunities, make sure you've got the right help. What we'd like to know is where have people gone to for help already? And those are most of the obvious ones that we hear about. If your answer is other, then perhaps if you put down none, that'll help us. What we're going to move on to in a moment is a different perspective. We're now going to be hearing from Rahul Kale, Director of International Business at Typhoo Tea. Now, Rahul is going to tell us the story of an organization that's much bigger than a lot of the typical smaller SMEs and startups that we often talk with. But more importantly, I'm not sure if this is the wrong way of explaining it, Rahul, but it's a story of an organization that had been very successful in the UK and perhaps wasn't doing as well as they'd like. And therefore, the need to go to export markets was driven by things not being as good as they could have been, rather than, in Maria's case, things going from strength to strength. But before we get to Rahul, let me close this poll and share the results. Just click the wrong button. So it's a fairly even split between government departments and going it alone. What I think is quite surprising is that even though there's a plethora of help from trade associations and private sector organisations, a lot of SMEs aren't really using that. And that might be something we come back to later in the discussion. It'll certainly be something, those of you that are back on Thursday, to look at the other sources of support, because I think that's one of the main messages we want from these webinars and from our food and drink feature. But if I pass us on to Rahul now, we're now going to take a look at what Typhoo has to offer. Rahul, you're on the line to talk to us.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Away you go.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. The essence of my presentation today is to show how important export is for Typhoo's business, and where we were in the past and where we have come now in this journey of exports. Just quickly, a history of Typhoo Tea on the left. Yes, it's a very big brand in the UK, very well known since 1903. But 5 years ago, we had a sales of £75 million in the UK. It was a loss-making company with declining market share, primarily because of the pressure from the UK retailers such as Tesco, Sainsbury's on putting a lot of promotions. And as we all know, the UK market is very much promotion-driven. So that's where we were. 100% of our sales came from UK home trade. Yes, we packed a lot of tea, but we were not profitable at that time. So that was a time when the company decided to bring me into the business to head the international sales. And this is where we are today. We have a sales of £90 million, and the split has changed. 90% of the sales come from the UK and 10% come from international. Typhoo is a profit-making brand. It's one of the fastest growing brands in the tea segment. Our volume of production has also increased. We employ less people now in the UK, a lot more people outside, but that's a strategic decision which we took. We have manufacturing sites now in the UK as well as in Kenya and India. As we know, tea doesn't grow in the UK, so it was very, very important for us to have manufacturing sites in countries where tea is grown. So that was the decision that was taken in the last few years. Our brands are now sold in Europe, North America, Middle East, Russia, Africa, and Asia. We won the FDEA bronze medal in 2012 for achievements in export. The next slide basically tells us where our global business is today. As I mentioned, Typhoo is a mainstream tea, very promotion-driven in the UK, and hence our customers throughout the world are mainly large retailers, supermarket chains. So I've just kind of given a quick glimpse of where we are in terms of various different geographies and the supermarket chains where we are present. A lot of people probably don't know this, but Typhoo Tea, as as a company, has quite a few other small brands, brands such as Ridgway's, London Fruit and Herb, Heath and Heather, etc., which people in the UK may or may not know. But what we basically did in the last 5 years is use the horses for courses strategy, because if there are markets which cannot pronounce Typhoo tea, there is no point in taking those products to those markets. Instead, we took a brand like London Fruit and Herb, purely because the name London has a premium associated with it, and it's a very easy, recognizable name. So that was one of the things which we did as a strategy, and I'm going to talk a little bit more when I come into this next slide. What has been the secret of our success? I would primarily say 4 different points. I mean, despite the adverse economic situations worldwide, we did not take a defeatist attitude. And what we tried to do is we tried getting into new and niche markets, simply because very large companies such as a Unilever or Tetley wouldn't necessarily go into niche markets purely because those markets might not be big enough for them. But because we are a medium-sized company, no business is small, and that was the strategy which we took as a company. What we also did was started forging strategic alliances with overseas companies and like-minded British brands. Now, this has been a very, very important element of our success. For example, in Czech Republic, what we did was we tied up with Walker Shortbread, because shortbread and tea go together. Similarly, what we also did in France was have a alliance with Warburton's for their sliced bread business. So, I mean, things like these are very, very important, where you do a strategic alliance with a like-minded British brand, which is not your competitor but can complement your business. Typhoo tea and all its brands are mainly in the mass market, but what we also did was focus on the quality. So even though it's a mass market tea, we focused on ensuring that our service quality and the product quality is maintained at all levels. What we also identified in our business, especially hot beverages and tea, is that the market outside the UK is a lot more advanced compared to the UK. In the UK, people drink tea with milk and sugar, and that's it. Whereas markets such as Russia, Central Europe, China, the varieties, the products that are sold in the tea category are quite advanced, and the variety is very, very large. So we regularly expanded our product range, did a lot of new product development, and that basically helped us to get new export markets. What are the key steps in ensuring you are successful in export? So approach the right export market, a market which has a demand for your products, has the right type of customer base. Have a product that is innovative in design and taste. As I said, nobody wants a me-too product. Even though you are a mass market or say a value segment brand, still people expect some sort of innovation in taste and design. I would also say that have the ability to deliver on promise, especially when you're dealing with the Japanese. If you promise them that you're going to deliver a certain product by a certain time, they would expect you to deliver on your promise. Have a brand name that is appropriate. Going back to my initial point about why we decided not to take the Typhoo brand for certain markets, purely because people just couldn't pronounce it. And that's the reason why we said, okay, look at our brand portfolio. We have a brand called London Fruit and Herbs. Makes sense. London, easy name to pronounce. Go with that name. So that's what I recommend as a strategy. Give importance to logo and design and packing regulations. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to take the same design and logo and use it across all markets. That may work with very high-end specialty products, but if you are in the middle end of the spectrum, then it's very, very important that your design and logo is tailored for the local requirements. What are the key channels of distributions in export market? I mean, you need a master importer who will basically import products from you and then start distributing them to regional and local distributors. And then multiple supermarket chains, cash and carries are also the next level of segment. Specialty retailers and department stores. For imported products, what we have seen in markets such as China, where it's very difficult to enter into large supermarket chains because of local regulations, plus the demand for imported British products exists at the moment only in high-end retail chains, and that's where we have tapped those particular distributors and retail and department stores. Food service and hospitality has also been a core area for focus for us. If these 5 elements are right in place, you could also look at doing an M&A, local manufacturing and licenses. Now, this actually works for large brands where you believe that you need to tap the local market, take a large piece of the local action. That's when companies go into M&A, local manufacturing and licenses. Probably a couple of years down the line, Typhoo would be in that position to look at doing one of these in, say, a strategic market like China or say, India.
Just a quick update on timing for your awareness, please.
Yeah, thank you. What are the challenges facing exports? I mean, we always have multinationals competing against us, which is a major threat. We also have issues related to local product labeling requirements, which were mentioned early on in this presentation today. Language and cultural barriers are also important. Selecting the right partner for the right country is a challenge. Yes, how do you go about finding the right customer for your products? Entry barriers, restrictions, import duties, quotas, labeling, etc. And UKTI and FDA are the right places to find information about that. And most importantly, if you're a large organization, how do you educate your staff and embrace the new procedures? Because when you go into export, it's going to make a lot of changes within your internal organization. So getting people on board and embrace the new procedures is critical for the export venture. I'll just quickly skip through some tips to overcome these challenges. I mean, if you have any specific questions to that, I can always answer them later. I mean, I have especially point number 3 and 4 put a lot of effort on internet as a key driver to enter the export market. And number 5th point, where I mentioned about participating in an exhibitions such as CR, Anuga, Gulf Food Expo, etc. Again, UKTI, FDA continuously participate in these exhibitions. They have a UK pavilion. That's the best way to get into these markets. What are the key do's? Know your customers, so market visit, trade missions, support your importers in export market. Know your competitor, which is very, very important, because if there are certain mistakes which your competitor is making, we don't want you to make those same mistakes. Invest wisely in market promotion, because a lot of your importers might ask a lot of funding, a lot of money from you, so make sure that you invest rightly. Please expect yourself to be flexible and creative, and under-promise and over-deliver, and be passionate about your brand, not emotional. And what are the don'ts? I mean, don't expect a quick return on money. International business is not a cash machine. Don't lose hope early. It takes time to build relationships, especially in markets in Asia. Take 1 year, literally, to start talking about export and import. Don't fear competition. Take inspiration from them and accelerate. Yes, there'll be large companies out there, but there's always a niche which can be explored. And plus, most importantly, don't forget your core strengths. Only you know your true potential. Thank you very much.
Rahul, that was fascinating. I really appreciate the time you've taken to go through an awful lot of information, from which I think it's quite difficult for people to know which are the things to focus on. So what I'm going to do is use some of the questions people have asked to go back to a couple of the points. I think one of the things that's coming through is, even though you describe yourself as a medium-sized firm, a lot of the folks on the line seem to feel that they're quite a lot smaller. And I think what's behind 2 or 3 of the questions is, do you really need to be in the tens of millions of pounds in order to have the cash flow available to invest in things like the branding, the channel distribution strategies and things like that. People are worried that they need a lot more cash than they've got, and they think they need to be big. You have a view?
I mean, I don't really agree with that, purely because I think the market entry cost in exports is relatively low. Investment is also low, unlike the UK home trade, which is driven mainly by the 5 large supermarket chains. So if you're not in those large supermarket chains, your actual market is very, very small. That's not the case in exports, because in a lot of export market, you don't have the same level of organized distribution like we have in the UK, which then enables you to tap into niche channels, specialty food, for which you don't need to be a very large company.
Okay, that's really interesting. Rahul, I'm just going to put a request across to Jenny, who's helping organise this. Jenny, we've got a couple of questions where people are looking to have us put up the do's and don'ts slide again. Could you take control of the slides back and pass us between the do's and don'ts while we ask the other questions, please? Okay, so I've looked after that. So I think people have been talking about size. This now goes back to a question where I'll bring Maria and Terry back in. There have been a couple of people that are saying they feel that what they have available to dip their toe into the export market is going to lead to very small volumes of orders, really sort of tiny amounts. And the question bluntly is it worth it? Maria, would you like to give us a thought on that?
I think certainly if you're looking at the European market, it's absolutely no different than trading with somebody in the UK. So if the customer, if it's somebody that you would deal with, if it was in the UK and it was an order that you would do then it's a no-brainer. I would go for it every time. And one of the things I know that Raoul mentioned about going to trade shows such as Anuga and Sial and all of those, I would say it's taken us about 6 years till we've got to the point where we feel confident enough to attend those big shows. And I think as a smaller producer, you can start out really small and maybe just have one customer that you sell to in one country, and then build on that and treat it very much as though they were an extension of the UK.
All right, in that case, I'll move over to Terry with a slight variation on that question. I think the other piece that's coming across, Terry, is people are perhaps concerned that the overhead of things like conforming to new labelling requirements and looking at any possible changes to your branding means that for the small sorts of orders, if you try and do what Maria's been talking about, their concern is there's an overhead that will cut into any potential profits. You have an opinion on that?
Well, I think Maria probably hit the nail on the head by talking about starting in Europe. I mean, after all, it's a single market, and the things that we do here, I mean, the regulations that cover what we do here are similar to those in other territories, and I think that's a good place to start. It is, though, I mean, I shouldn't do down that as a point, because of course it will vary between different sectors, and I think the key to this really is looking for some help and just trying to understand what those costs might be. And I think a good place to start would be FDEA, and there are also free resources on the European Commission websites that help with labelling. So if you have got those concerns, there's plenty of information out there that will help you take the decision. Okay,
let me dig into that a little deeper, because I think there are really two parts to the questions. One is the labelling and regulatory, and I think what you're saying is, particularly in the EU, that shouldn't be too onerous, go get some help. The second part of it, though, was saying, if you listen to some of the messages from Maria and Rahul, looking at your positioning and trying to perhaps reposition or enhance your brand, adjust it to take advantage of the Britishness and tap into what the consumers are looking for, is that not an overhead for a small business that might not be quite within reach?
I mean, it depends how you currently structure your brand and currently how things look. But the feedback that we get is that for relatively modest investments, where an opportunity has been identified, that those, I think that people have been able to justify that additional expense. And I wonder whether potentially Maria might have a view on this.
Maria?
Yeah, I do. I think certainly from our perspective as a high-end, handmade product, the positioning is very much, I'm not going to change that.
Right.
Occasionally we might get asked to put, say, a Union Jack on the label or something to differentiate that it's known it's made in the UK, and we've looked at doing that. But labelling and regulations for a lot of the time has come from our whoever the buyer is in whatever country. They know what is required. If it's a small high-end shop, for example, and we sell to distributors and we sell direct into store, but they know what their requirements are in that country, so use their expertise as well. And quite a lot of the time when they're buying into a British product, they want it exactly as you've got it because that's what they're buying into. So I can understand from Raoul's point of view, certainly with Typhoo, that it might be slightly different and they have to scale the repositioning somewhat differently. But certainly from my perspective as a small producer with a high-end product, that's what they're buying into. So their overhead is minimal. It might be just adding an extra small label to the back of the jar.
So I think what I'm taking from all of this is that if you pick markets where you have minimal brand changes, it plays to what you're doing, and then as you get more orders and more profitable, you can then look at something a little bigger. That seems to be one thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just to add to this discussion, I mean, in our case, Typhoo is a mass market mainstream brand, and we adopted the Union Jack on our packaging a couple of years ago, mainly because it was driven by export, where there was a requirement. It wasn't, the name Typhoo was not giving that Britishness in it, purely because the name Typhoo was coined about 100 years ago, which means doctor in Chinese. and for us, that was not a key strength that was coming out. So we had to put a Union Jack on our packaging, which has really helped us. And we also changed our slogan to Great British Tea since 1903. But going back to the second question about the labeling, I mean, I agree with Maria that most of your importers would know the local regulations and they would tell you what to do. And in the UK, there are several consolidators who regularly consolidate shipments from various different manufacturers and send them abroad. So you could use these services if for labeling, and they help you in these measures as well.
That's really interesting. We've got 5 minutes or so left. I need to have a few seconds at the end to talk about a wrap-up and a survey. So I want to try and get through 2 or 3 questions and move away from the branding. First question is primarily for Rahul, I guess. When it comes to finding a specific suitable distributor, do you have any tips for people who are going into a new country and don't really know too much, apart from obviously talking to the FDA, going to the UKTI folks and getting some advice? How do you pick your distributor?
The best and the cheapest way is internet. And I've used it continuously, regularly. LinkedIn is one of my key tools to find new importers, new distributors. Most of our customers across the world who are interested in British products are on the internet. We also look at what other British brands are doing in those markets, again using internet as a tool to research, and then approach them. We actually send emails, a cold email saying, we are a British tea company, we have seen you're dealing with Walker shortbread, would you be interested? 2 out of 10 respond and say, yeah, send us samples.
Okay, so that's one approach that works. Maria, what's your view on finding distributors in a new country you're exploring?
Exactly the same, really. A similar approach. We probably use UKTI quite a bit more in that respect, just to sort of check people out. But also that the Open to Export website, again, you can pose a question on there and somebody will come back and give you a good answer. And the internet every time.
All right. Terry, anything you want to add, or have we got unanimity on that question?
I think other panellists have covered it. I suppose some of the regional events that we've all been involved in various times. So earlier this year, we worked with the UKTI on a Central Europe event, and that was a low-cost way for exporters or potential exporters to meet distributors and to get some advice from the in-country teams who are over in town. So yeah, you know, internet is best. There's no doubt that a bit of desktop research can yield a huge amount, as Rahul's demonstrated.
Right. Okay, so there's one question I'm going to close with in a moment. There are a few other questions that we just haven't got time for. What I'd suggest to the people that have asked, if you haven't had your question answered, please go to the Open to Export website after this and just post it as a general question. We'll also have a record. We'll be passing them on to the speakers, and we'll see if we can get them to send specific answers to you. Before I ask the question, I think there are two observations from the audience that I'd like to make. One is lots of people are saying thank you to all of our speakers for excellent presentations. I think a lot of people have found these very useful and inspiring. The second, for you in particular, Rahul, someone has pointed out that tea does grow in the UK, in Cornwall.
Yes, it does, but not in huge volumes, not
we'll
large enough.
You don't need to answer that. It was just a comment that I needed to pass on. So the question that I wanted to put to Maria and Rahul in particular is, a lot of people are saying, how does exporting, given that you've got overheads and you've got to look at cash flow for a year and all the rest of it, what does it do to your profits as opposed to your turnover? If each of you could spend 30 seconds giving me your views. Rahul first, please.
In terms of profit, what we have seen is in the UK, because the retailers control majority of the UK food and drinks market, the margins are quite small in the UK now, with extra costs like promotion, television, gate fees, etc. You don't have those costs. So in terms of profit, yes, it's the efforts are more in exports, but the rewards are also more. Excellent. Maria?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it does, sometimes it will take a long time, and so it does affect your profit and your margin slightly, but the rewards at the end of it are huge and vast, and it's such a wide market that a bit of investment now, 2 years down the line, you'll be so grateful for. You've just got to make sure you've got the cash flow in hand in order to do it.
Okay, that's been really useful. Terry, anything you want to say when we wrap up? I've given the other speakers quite a few questions. Anything you want to close with before we get to the wrap-up?
No, I mean, other than to say they were two very inspiring case studies, and I just hope that to quote Maria's example of the guy that grew his export business to 25 million, I hope people will pick up on those key messages and will think, actually, you know, we might give this a go.
Great. That's a really good note to end it on. I'm going to say thank you to all of our speakers and, as importantly, to all the attendees that have been asking questions and listening intently. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Open to Export is a place where you can ask questions of UKTI and the speakers and anyone else. As we close down the webinar, you will get a survey popping up on your screen. We'd really appreciate it if you could take 15-20 seconds to just answer the multiple choice questions on how we did so that we can make these even better. But with that, thank you very much, everyone, for your time this afternoon, and look forward to seeing you all on Thursday on the second in our food and drink webinars. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.